From the depth traps that barely survived a single patrol, to the silent killers that terrorized entire oceans and sank fleets without warning. These submarines decided who lived, who drowned, and who won the war beneath the waves. The temperature inside the hull has hit 50 degrees Celsius, that is 122 degrees Fahrenheit, inside a sealed metal tube, underwater, during a depth charge attack. A British destroyer is circling above you. You need to dive. You needed to dive 30 seconds ago, but the Adua takes 60 seconds to submerge when a competent submarine takes 30. That extra half minute is not an inconvenience. It is a death sentence. British destroyers figured this out quickly, and depth charges did the rest. Italy entered the war with over 100 submarines. Over 100. That sounds like a serious naval force. It wasn't. The WWII class, 17 boats, was the loudest symbol of why. Slow dive time, catastrophic ventilation, a cramped internal layout that broke crew morale in weeks. Several Adua boats were lost to mechanical failure before they ever encountered an enemy vessel. That single fact tells you everything about the design. Italy had the numbers and still lost the Mediterranean. The Adua class is why. The Soviet Stuka, the Pike class, is a different kind of failure, and in some ways a more disturbing one. On paper, she looked respectable. Decent range, reasonable armament. The boat itself wasn't catastrophically flawed, but a submarine is only as good as the human system around it, and the Soviet human system in 1941 was broken in ways no amount of steel could fix. Command a Stuka in the Baltic, and you've identified a target. The firing solution is there, but the political officer is standing 2 feet behind you, and every decision you make is a potential report. Soviet submarine captains weren't just fighting the Germans, they were fighting their own doctrine, their own command culture, their own fear of initiative. The loss rate among Stuka boats on war patrols was staggering. Some were sunk by mines, some by enemy ships, and some simply vanished. No distress signal, no wreckage ever recovered. The Pike class is a case study in what happens when institutional terror replaces tactical judgment. Rank 8, the British S-class, early variants. Now the British built some extraordinary submarines, and the later S-class boats are a completely different story. But the early variants earned their spot on this list the hard way. They were designed for the North Sea, for short-range operations, and for relatively shallow water. Then the war expanded, and suddenly the Royal Navy needed these boats in Norway, the Mediterranean, and the Far East. Everywhere they were not built to go. The torpedo reload system was awkward. The pressure hull on early variants had thickness issues that made deep diving genuinely dangerous. And the habitability, the ability for men to actually live inside the boat on a long patrol, was by the accounts of veterans absolutely miserable. One commander described it as living inside a wet filing cabinet. The early S-class got men killed through design, not just enemy action. Rank 7, the Japanese I-400. Here is where this ranking gets genuinely strange. The I-400 was technically extraordinary, the largest submarine built during World War II, longer than a football field, capable of traveling 2/3 of the way around the world without refueling and carrying 3 aircraft in a watertight hangar on its deck. Submarines that launched airplanes. The Japanese designed them to strike the Panama Canal and sever the artery between the Atlantic and Pacific fleets. Visionary doesn't begin to cover it. So, why is it ranked 7? Because it never did anything. 3 were completed. The war ended before the mission launched. The United States Navy reportedly delayed Japan's surrender announcement just to capture and study them in secret. Visionary design, 0 operational impact. In a war where results are everything, a museum piece that never became a weapon ranks near the bottom. Rank 6, the German Type 2, nicknamed the dugout canoe, and that nickname should tell you exactly what it was. It was 40 meters long, carried a crew of 25, and had 3 torpedo tubes. It had no business in the open Atlantic. But here is the thing. It never pretended to be anything else. The Type 2 was a coastal trainer, and at that job, it was excellent. The core of Germany's U-boat ace generation cut their teeth on these little boats in the Baltic. It was not a great weapon. It built great submariners. In a war decided by human skill as much as hardware, that counts for something. Those are the boats that failed or never got the chance to matter. Now we get to the ones that actually changed the war. The I-400 carried 3 aircraft and never fired a shot. So which failure hits harder to you, the Ottawa's deadly design flaw or Japan's visionary submarine that never became a weapon? Drop your answer in the comments below. Now let's get to the boats that actually decided the war. 5 patrols into the Pacific War, the USS Naval was already an embarrassment on paper. Big, slow, loud, it was a relic of the 1920s fleet submarine doctrine that believed submarines should accompany surface battle groups into open combat. That concept was dead before the war started. Fast attack boats had buried it. So there sat the Naval, a 371-foot anachronism that the Navy did not quite know what to do with. Then someone looked at her size differently. Because she was so large, she could carry extraordinary amounts of cargo, supplies, ammunition, gold bullion, and something the Pacific Campaign desperately needed: Filipino guerrilla fighters delivered directly into occupied island territory. The Naval made 10 clandestine resupply runs into the Philippines, inserting personnel and equipment into places no surface ship could reach and no other submarine had the capacity to carry. 10 missions into the enemy's backyard, running slow and quiet where speed was not the point, reach was. That's the editorial verdict on the Naval. Not every weapon performs as designed. The best military organizations find new uses for what they have. Rank 4, the British T-class. 11 torpedo tubes. That number matters, because almost no Allied submarine came close to it. But the tubes are not why the T-class earns this spot. It is what the T-class did with them, and where. Norwegian fjords, the Arctic, the Mediterranean, Pacific shipping lanes. The T-class operated in all of them with equal effectiveness, and that kind of range is not a spec sheet achievement. It is a design philosophy. A submarine that does everything adequately is often more valuable than one that does one thing brilliantly. HMS Turbulent and HMS Tally-Ho were not just hull numbers. They were boats with reputations, with histories, with crews who trusted their machine in conditions that killed less balanced designs. What a good submarine gives you is not just survival, it is legacy. Rank 3, the German Type Vic. Over 700 were built, the most produced submarine class in history, a North Atlantic convoy in 1942. Darkness, cold, merchant sailors scanning a black surface that tells them nothing. Then it erupts. A Type Vic Wolfpack had been tracking that convoy for 2 days, running on the surface at night, invisible to radar that did not yet exist in sufficient numbers. In 1942, Wolfpack doctrine was sinking Allied ships faster than they could be constructed. Churchill later wrote that the U-boat threat was the one thing that truly frightened him during the entire war. Not the Blitz, not Rommel, the submarines. So why is the Type VC not number 1? Because Allied technology caught up, and when it did, it caught up fast. Improved radar, ASTIC refinements, the breaking of Enigma. By 1943, the Hunter had become the hunted. Over 75% of all Type VIC crew members who served in the war were killed. The most fearsome submarine of the early war became a coffin by the end of it. The Type VX nearly won the Battle of the Atlantic, and then lost it. Rank 2, the American Gato and Balao class. Where the Type VIC was eventually broken by Allied countermeasures, the Gato and Balao class submarines systematically dismantled the Japanese empire from below. US submarines represented roughly 2% of Navy personnel and sank over 55% of all Japanese shipping lost during the war. Japan's war machine ran on oil from the Dutch East Indies, iron ore from Manchuria, food, troops, equipment, all of it moving by sea. A Japanese tanker captain in 1944, somewhere between port and home, knew that an American submarine was almost certainly waiting somewhere along that route, and there was nothing he could do about it. The Gato and Balao class didn't just sink ships, they turned off the tap. The German Type 21 didn't win the war. It arrived too late, with only a handful operational before Germany's surrender. but it is the most important submarine in this ranking precisely because of what it proved was possible. It offered fully submerged, high-speed performance that made surface running obsolete. A snorkel system meant it almost never needed to expose itself to aircraft. A sonar suite could track targets without periscope exposure. A torpedo reload system was 3 times faster than anything that came before it. Germany deployed the Type 21 in 1942 instead of 1945, the Battle of the Atlantic may have had a different ending. That would not have been good for the Allies. Every modern submarine in the world today is a descendant of the Type 21's design philosophy. The Americans studied it. The Soviets copied it directly. NATO and the Warsaw Pact both built their Cold War submarine doctrines around what the Type 21 demonstrated. The deadliest submarine of World War II was not the one that sank the most ships. It was the one that showed every navy on Earth what underwater warfare would look like for the next 100 years. Subscribe to World War's Files if you want more like this. Watch this one next.